This episode of the Media Leader podcast was edited by our production partner, Trisonic. And if you're looking for podcast production support, we highly recommend them. Find them at trisonic.co.uk.
We have to answer to the government, as you know, and it's part of our remit to make sure that UK society thrives. And right now it's in a difficult place. It really is. And so, the content we curate, which is funded by advertising, that content supports UK society moving to a better place.
Welcome to a special edition of the Media Leader podcast. I'm your host, Jack Benjamin, and I am coming to you from a positively sweltering Cannes at the Festival of Creativity. This week, in partnership with Channel 4, I sat down with the public service broadcaster's commercial chief, Rak Patel, as well as members of his commercial leadership team, Kassam and David Amodio, in separate interviews. The timing couldn't be more interesting. On Monday, Channel 4 announced it had partnered with 5 demand-side platforms to make advertising with Channel 4 more accessible to advertisers. And on Tuesday, in collaboration with Comcast, ITV, and Sky, the broadcaster's SME marketplace, Universal Ads, officially launched. I asked Patel, Kassam, and Amodio about the developments, the state of the UK TV industry, and how Channel 4 is balancing the need to reduce enough friction to make TV easy to buy, while retaining enough friction to make it a trustworthy medium for advertisers. We'll be releasing the episodes in 2 parts, the first with Patel and the second with both Kassam and Amodio. This is our conversation. I hope you enjoy.
Rak Patel, what a pleasure. It's always great to talk to you here at Cannes. We're at the Seed Tag Lounge. And the last time we spoke at Cannes, you just announced Universal Ads was coming down the pipe. A lot has changed in the past year. You've got a new CEO at Channel 4 and Priya Dogra. You got an entirely new commercial team. Talk me through some of the big changes of the past year ahead of what is about to be the launch of Universal Ads.
Yeah, sure. Well, there's plenty that's been going on from a year ago, and I've got to start with that. I was a few months in when I was sat with you this time last year, and we were talking through, okay, what's the direction that Channel 4 is going to go in? What are the areas we're going to sort of focus on? And it has been an incredibly busy year. I'll start with your first part of your question regarding Universal Ads. We're so happy with where we're at this stage. Obviously, we announced as a collaboration that we were going to do together, and I'm delighted to say it's fully on track, which is brilliant. So the bigger play there is how do we build out the universe of those that are able to get the benefit of TV advertising. And so I'm really pleased with the progress that we made. I'm very pleased with the technology that we have. I think what Comcast have built through UA is really powerful, and it allows us to democratize TV to a new segment of advertisers. So that's really important. If I rewind back a year and think about what I sort of shared with you back then, for me, I'm quite delighted that I'm not saying that we're having to pivot in terms of some of the areas of focus. Yeah. And there's sort of 3 components to that, and that's one of the reasons we're here back in Cannes this year. I think the first is, how do we have the most progressive sales operation in the UK? I think that's massively important. And what that means is, how do we ensure we're out in the market, we are really sort of inspiring our advertisers, the audiences out there with the content we're creating and delivering big scale to them on an ongoing basis. And I think the team have just done an amazing job. Obviously we brought David Amodio in after his little sabbatical to Amazon.
Yeah, he was gone for about a year and then came back.
That's
after.
right,
He's there for 18 years.
That's right, 18 years at Channel 4,
about
18 months or so over at Amazon, and he's come back. And one of the reasons we brought him in, and Kassam, who's also on the leadership team who came in from Reddit, is more around our sort of second priority, particularly with David's across everything. And that really sort of focuses on how can we be advertiser-led and agency along. Now, the first thing to share there is we have such strong relationships with agencies. Our service legacy, our service heritage is based around how we partner with agencies. What we need to build on top of that is an advertiser-led, an advertiser-first type of mentality. And that allows us to really be thinking about growing that universe of advertisers. It's all well and good to say we need to have thousands of advertisers, but if you're not set up and you're not really focused on those advertisers of different sizes, then you can't really build in that way. So that second point around the advertiser priority is really key. And then the third one, and you touched on UA already, but it's how we are joined up as a collaborative force. And I know you've asked me this several times regarding collaboration within broadcast, within TV. It still blows me away in terms of from a positive perspective about how we collaborate, and it's built out of regulation and built out of ThinkBox and various other things. And so, the fact that we are about to launch UA in the right way, the fact that we're thinking about how we can better TV, whether it's around measurement, whether it's around accessibility, whether it's all those sort of things, becomes really key. So that's the third element. We're out here in force, and I know my broadcaster partners are out here too.
Yeah, well, I'll be looking forward to catching up with them as well. But
more than Channel 4?
No, I didn't say anything about that.
All right, okay.
I just like to stay neutral here.
Of course. We are family, so it's fine. It's fine.
It's a lot of change, but what I hear is also a lot of consistency. Despite changing commercial team, despite a new CEO, the message is still fundamentally quite similar from the same message last year. It's about sort of actually following through on what you were saying. There's also been relatively consistent performance in terms of, revenue at Channel 4 is about even, it's down 1%. Digital ad revenue is growing. Total ad revenue is, again, I think slightly down as well. What is key to driving growth? Is it growing the number of advertisers on the platform? Is it growing the pie? And if so, I'll ask you about universal ads in a second in more detail. How key is it to that?
Well, sure.
growth?
Well, look, I think sitting up at the top is, we need to be driving sustainable business growth. So there isn't one silver bullet that sort of drives that. I think it's a multitude of different approaches and strategies which sort of enable that. The metric, as some may call the lag metric, that sort of comes out of the back end is your number of advertisers. But in order to attract those advertisers, you need to make sure that you have the right sort of sales agreement for that particular cohort of brands, so that they're able to use TV in the right manner. And so, I would say that for us, in order for us to drive that sustainable growth across all of our ecosystem, whether it's digital, whether it's linear, whether it's streaming, whether it's programmatic, it's really important that the demand that's coming in is maximized at every given point. One of the other things that I know we've announced today has been around, how do we make it easier for brands and agencies to buy? I mean, that's a habitual question around TV. And also, the echo chamber would say TV is hard to buy. Well, today we've announced a whole raft of DSP collaborations.
5 DSPs.
5 DSPs today, because it's really important that we're able to support that demand coming in a brand safe way as well. And I've been really pleased with each of those tech providers as well, in terms of them really understanding the values of Channel 4, the fact that we have strong premium content, brand strong, in a trusted environment as well. So demand aggregation is a critical bit, and then how we're able to sort of serve that in the right way becomes key.
Becoming easier to buy, dare I say.
Yeah. I mean, Jack,
it's been an industry trend, everyone wanting to be as easy to buy as possible.
No, totally. And I think there's a couple of things in that as well, right? Because I think absolutely it is a task on all of us to make it easier. But the second thing is, I think others, maybe outside TV, have latched on to that a little bit. There's been a bit of an echo chamber around TV not being easy to buy, TV in all its forms. And I think that's a bit of a fallacy, actually. We launched programmatic a good couple of years ago. We launched VOD 20 years ago. We're adding tools and approaches that will be important to advertisers, but it's really important to sort of drive out that universe of brands that use TV. It becomes really key.
You hinted at it earlier with the collaboration within the industry and ThinkBox and the other broadcasters that you'll be up on stage with tomorrow at ThinkBox's Televisionaries panel.
Will you be there?
Of course I will be there.
Of course. Excellent.
It'll be on the live blog, but people will be hearing this interview after the fact. You've said in the past that your real competition is not necessarily the other broadcasters, it's with platforms. It is with trying to take market share for TV from platforms. And you've also embraced a sort of platform-like strategy, sort of like, if you can't see them, join them. Not entirely, of course, keeping lots of really important parts of what makes public service broadcasting unique. Can you speak a little bit about how you view that going forward?
Yeah, of course. Look, I think there's a couple of elements within that in terms of how we sort of future-proof Channel 4, how we future-proof. We're coming up to our 44th birthday the 4's. There you go. It's towards the end of
Apparently
this
a
year.
lucky number, probably.
Very lucky indeed.
Yeah.
And so what's important for us is, as a public service media organisation, is how do we future-proof for the next 4 to 4 years? And so a part of that, being commercially funded and ad-driven, we need to have a really progressive approach in the marketplace that allows us to serve the brands and the audiences that we already have, but grow at the same time, right? So the sort of platform adopted approach, and it wasn't the platforms that adopted it. They brought that and took that from tech. So it was the IBMs and the Microsofts that first sort of brought this sales and service model. So, for me, I think it's really important that we sort of think in that way around, okay, which of the brands that are on Channel 4 are we farming, and that becomes really key. And then the other aspect is obviously from the hunting perspective, so the sales and service piece. And what that allows us to do is just be robust as we go ahead, and allows us to grow, through the market conditions that are around us. I think that's a really big point to it. And it's about control, controlling the levers that allow us to sort of grow in the right manner. So that's the sort of first point. And then the second point, in terms of, you mentioned there, and I've been very open about, where do we compete? Again, you've written about this, as have the other wonderful media leader journalists as well. We know that 75% of all ad revenue goes to 3 platforms. Last year, 91% of all new advertiser money went to those same 3 platforms. There is not a balance and equilibrium, within the ad ecosystem and the ad marketplace. And so we look at it from a perspective of, okay, how do we bring that balance back? How do we bring that equilibrium? Because it is really key that we do that for multiple reasons. I think one reason is centered around the brand versus performance piece. Again, something that you've well documented
Following
as well.
marketing science.
Exactly that. Dr. Augustin Fu's done an amazing piece around, those brands in the Fortune 500 who over-indexed in performance and what's happened to them around growth, and they haven't grown over the last 15 years. So I think that's a really important piece. And then something that we feel very strongly about at Channel 4, and I do too, is around the health of UK society. I think this is a really, really key point too. The cynics out there might say, of course Rak's going to say that in terms of ad revenue and so on. However, I think there's a really important piece here regarding the state of UK society. We have to answer to the government, as you know, and it's part of our remit to make sure that UK society thrives. And right now it's in a difficult place. It really is. And so, the content we curate, which is funded by advertising, and the same for other public service broadcasters out there, or even commercially funded, that content supports UK society moving to a better place. So if you wrap that all together, it's one approach in terms of driving us to sustainability.
About 7 or 8 months ago, at one of our events, you debuted this "Turn Down the Toxic" ask, which was essentially asking advertisers, based on marketing science and also from a social good perspective, maybe try disinvesting from certain platforms and reinvesting in public service media, of course, like yourself, but like other broadcasters, as you've said. That hasn't necessarily happened since you debuted that, at least not according to AA work figures that we've been tracking. What needs to happen for that messaging to resonate more with advertisers?
I think we've got to keep going, right? The last signal will be revenue. Right? I think there's multiple signals that the industry needs. There is a wake-up call going on at the moment. Even if you take what's happening here in Cannes this year, there are multiple events and showcases around governance, around what the direction that maybe tech might be taking the industry in. Obviously, what's happened in the UK around the social media ban as well. These are all important steps for sure, in order for us to move to a place where it becomes something that's much more straightforward for a brand and an advertiser to move money to those sort of right areas. But what we can't lose sight of is what's happening to UK society at the moment, and that's something we at Channel 4 will continue to sort of drive. I really do think that algorithms can fuel hate. I think TV actually unites, and that's something for us that's going to be really important as the years progress.
I want to talk about universal ads in more detail. By the time this interview airs, it will have launched. Of course. Hurrah!
Yeah, very good.
It is a big deal.
It is.
I mean, last year, I did say it was the biggest news piece that came out of Cannes.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal that it's launching. For anyone out there that isn't aware of what's on offer, what can advertisers expect from the universalized experience now that it's launching in the UK?
Yeah, of course. So there's a couple of things here. Firstly, we've talked quite a bit about, which audiences or which brand, is it after? TV's never been able to cater for this SME because it has been out of reach for them in terms of, the democratization of TV. I heard a fascinating and interesting fact yesterday over dinner, actually, that and you might have to fact check me on this one.
Okay.
In 2000, there were 300 advertisers in the UK. Today, there's 3.6 million. And if you
I don't know. I can't fact check
Does that sound right? Let's go with it. What do you think? 300,000 in the year 2000.
I would be surprised, but I've seen crazier numbers before. I don't know who your source is.
Who needs a source? No. And so, if you think then just about that sort of journey of businesses in the UK that are experiencing growth through
digital first business,
social media and so on, right? So again, going back to why it's a big thing and why there was such an amazing reaction last year was there's choice for these brands, right? So that's the first thing, choice is being created. Now, what these brands are very familiar with is easy to buy with a credit card, very low budget, they're able to optimize, they can see the performance and it's measured instantaneously as well. And that's what the UA tool absolutely provides. And that's why we were drawn to Comcast and UA, because of the technology that they've created and the wrap around that as well, because it's not just about the technology. You market to this group or this cohort very differently to how you market to enterprise and so on as well. But what also, I've been delighted with, as my counterparts have been over the space of the last 6 months in particular, this isn't just a take out of the box from the US and implant into the UK. We've made it very UK centric. There's a integration with Clearcast so that we make sure that the brands that are coming onto the platform through this platform are still going through the same regulation and governance that we would have across any part of our ecosystem. And that's massively important, because if you're a small or medium business, a mid-market business, what's really important for them is that they're getting the best of Channel 4, the best of Sky, the best of ITV. And that is centered around trusted environment, premium content, very regulated, and a lot of governance that sits over the top. The tool itself, will be very familiar to them. It's very similar to how you buy social media. And in fact, again, why I'm getting really excited is not only the cohorts of advertisers, but actually different types of budgets that we'll be going after too. I think that's really important. And so, social media agencies and so on, these are the sort of agencies that we've never spoken to before, but we'll be going after.
You mentioned you tailored universal ads for the UK. It's been live in the US for about a year.
Yeah, that's right.
How has it gone over there? Is it actually, making a difference to those broadcasters' bottom lines? And what have you learned from that to try and adapt beyond maybe just adding Clearcast in?
Absolutely. Well, there's been multiple things actually. I think one is, being a year ahead means that the way that the product evolves this is a dynamic where product and tech products does have to iterate and develop constantly. That's the best tech, in the world.
Taking a platform mindset.
Yeah. Platform mindset, absolutely. So, it's driving a lot of success for the publishers that are out there, which is great. So that's one sort of tick for us. I think secondly...
What does that look like in terms of driving? Is it
more brands, absolutely. So
more advertisers,
absolutely.
More revenue?
Yeah, SME brands. And look, at the end of the day, it's incremental businesses. It's not fishing from the same pool. So that becomes really, really important. It's why, it's an important initiative and strategy for us, because we're going into an environment which we've not been in before. So that for me, and for us at Channel 4 and the other broadcasters, gives us a lot of sort of confidence as we go into launching and then really starting to accelerate the product itself. I don't want to sort of belittle how important it's been to bring the product itself to the standard of TV in terms of the regulation and the governance. I know you're saying there in terms of Clearcast and what else. That is huge. It really is, because what makes TV so strong, as you've heard me say before, is the regulation and is the governance and so on. And I think that for us was really important from the first conversation we had with UA and Comcast was, how do we make sure this is fit for the UK, fit for UK businesses? Because all of these businesses know our brands. They've grown up with Channel 4, Sky, and ITV. Really have.
It's interesting. Last year you said, friction is TV's superpower.
Yeah.
You've sort of developed a way to drastically reduce friction while also then making sure there's still some friction
Absolutely.
left. Because
Don't take the friction
that
away.
requires, that causes some trust between client and broadcast.
And again, look, I think the thing here is you can be easy to bowl, but retain your superpowers, right? And then the superpower here, the friction that's created, is the assurance that any consumer that sees any ad is of a standard, which means it's not fake, which means that it's telling the truth, which means that it inspires, it means that it entertains, all of those.
They know what it's set against,
Exactly.
as opposed to on certain platforms.
Absolutely right.
The go-to-market must be the next challenge, essentially. I imagine SMEs need education. I imagine that Google and Meta have gotten to them first, in all likelihood. So it's all about then talking to them and saying, hey, there is new supply in the market, and you can work with us instead. So what does that look like from a Channel 4 sales perspective?
Yeah, well, look, I think there's a couple of things even in that as well. A path has been carved out by the big tech giants, for sure. So, to the point earlier on about, here are millions of brands or tens of thousands of brands that are in the market that, use the function of marketing in a way that drives growth for their businesses, right? So, that's something that they are very familiar with and becomes really important. I think the sort of sales treatment, if you think of the sort of treatments that my sales team will do, has to be different across the different segments. So if I look at the sort of Channel 4 salespeople, will they be the team that are going out selling UA? No, absolutely not. Because the approach has to be very different. It has to be one that goes in scale, has to be around lead generation. And in fact, this is where UA actually help us massively, because part of our sort of collaboration with them is how they set up teams and really sort of, ensure that we drive that demand in that manner. And how you market to them is very different as well. It's a different set of events. They might not be at Cannes. In fact, the majority of them won't be at Cannes, but they will be going to stay in the space of events. There'll be a whole raft of events which today a Meta and a Google will be appearing at day in, day out. So again, it's a different form of muscle. As much as it's a new muscle around the technology for TV, it is also around the sales execution.
Well, and you've brought in a lot of sales talent that has experience working for platforms as
Absolutely.
well. So,
Yeah.
Perhaps was a long-term strategy
Maybe.
you were lining. Okay. Something else about SMEs that I just wanted to ask. The macroeconomic situation is a bit chaotic, and it has been feels like my entire life, but especially within the past 6 months. Oftentimes it's smaller businesses that feel the brunt of, sharp rises in energy inflation, in plastic, if you're like a consumer packaged goods brand. How might that affect the initial go-to-market? Because you're launching UA at this time. You're going to small businesses and saying, actually, you can use TV, it's easy, and it's not as expensive as you might think. But belts might be tightening as well. So I'm curious how you view the wider market.
I look at it through a different lens, actually. I think this is the perfect time to give them TV as a means to drive their businesses. If you think about the power of TV, again, something that I've spoken to you about, which was another thing that blew me away when I sort of came in. TV for decades has this power to drive business performance. It really does. And, what we're saying here is, here's an alternative for you. Here's a way you can access that power to drive growth for your business. So I actually think this is the perfect time for them to have choice. So that's the first thing. I think choice becomes really key. I think the second thing is that, if you think about the brand equity our three brands have, you have ITV that's 70 years old, you have us that are 43 and 8 months old or so. You obviously Sky that's been in, for decades has been in the UK. These are brands that every UK citizen is very, very familiar with, very aware of, and trusts as well. So, suddenly you have an environment here where, I feel very sort of excited about the fact that they can actually utilize those brands that they've grown up with. And so, our early sort of indication, obviously we've been doing alpha tests and so on. Yes, the product works, the product provides the right outcomes, the right measurement and those sort of things. But you have brands here who are really excited about being on the Channel 4 ecosystem. being across, TV shows that they've grown up with on ITV, or, in a subscription phase where it comes to Scar. You cannot underestimate the power of our brands and the brand equity we already have in the UK, because we've been driving UK society for decades.
And is there a zig when others zag argument, or would you say, look, all your other digital businesses, they're probably taking a slightly different approach, be it on Google or Meta or other platforms that are self-service? Are you going to make an argument and say, do something that your competitor's not doing?
Well, listen, I don't think it's so much about about that per se. I think it's about an alternative, and I think it's more about having the right choice in front of them. I think that becomes really key. I think also, look, this perfectly ladders back into what we shared about when it comes to either turn down the toxic or bring the equilibrium back into between brand and performance. And I think that's our sort of positioning to it for sure.
Gotcha. I want to look ahead a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
As I mentioned, chaotic H1. Let's hope for a less chaotic H2, just for all of our mental sanity, I imagine. There's a lot going on in TV. The pie is trying to be grown, but generally TV's been slower to grow than some other media channels. And equally, we might see consolidation sooner rather than later. We still don't know about ITV and Sky. In terms of predictions, dare you make any predictions for H2, just for the next 6 months?
H2. Well, look,
what do you see coming down the line?
Before I get into H2, consumption of TV at the moment has never been better. So, I do want to sort of start with the content we're curating is driving the scale that is something that you can't get anywhere else. Tiptoe, hopefully you've watched Tiptoe
I
yet.
still haven't seen it, but I've been busy with pre-can prep.
Of course, yeah.
I know it's on my list.
I know you're going to do all your prep, but it's a show which is really showing a state of where the UK is at. So very close to our values and our remit, but at the same time, huge numbers from a millions perspective. So in terms of consumption, I do want to sort of start there, because again, the echo chambers would say that's not the case. Now, if you then take that into the second half of the year, I think for us, what we're really excited about, and obviously we've had quite a few announcements. We've got the SME proposition. We're becoming easier to buy when it comes to integrations with DSP partners. Of course, Lantern is starting to sort of accelerate as well. I think what
Lantern will be the official measurement system for Universal Ads as well. So that's been previously announced.
Yeah, exactly. What I would say is, there's a big wind of change that's going on at the moment, and I've sort of touched on it earlier on, and I know we've talked about it before as well. And what I mean by that wind of change is what's right for UK society. And UK society, like I said earlier on, is in a very difficult place right now in terms of how mental health is being really sort of supported and ensuring that the right stories are being told. And like I said, when I look around the sort of Quizette this week, it's the first time I've seen so many panels, so many showcases around, are we on the right path? What more reform do we need? How does governance actually work across the whole industry? How do we act responsibly to make sure that the ad industry is around for the next 100 years or so? So I do think in the next 6 months, as well as ensuring that the business grows and we bring more advertisers in and so on, I think that wind of change will get stronger and stronger over the next half, and then as we move into the next couple of years as well. And I think you can see some, really important moments happening, and we need more.
Last question. You mentioned all the different things going on in Cannes conversations. You're alluding probably to the UN is speaking.
Charlotte
Scadden, who I've interviewed before, and go listen to that podcast as well.
Great podcast.
Molly Rose Foundation. Well, thanks.
It's very good.
The Molly Rose Foundation is speaking. There are more of those conversations right now. What are some of the key themes that you're looking to consider or take away from, safety clearly seems to be one of them.
Absolutely. Look, I think clearly, particularly with such a heavy reliance on ad tech and tech here, what I've always loved about Cannes is, there is a lot of sort of future gazing, and you see some of the technologies that are going to help us sort of move forward. But as within the zeitgeist, there's this sort of rebalance and wind of change going on towards whether it's brand, toward whether it's creative work and so on. I think that's one thing that I really do want to sort of see in terms of, and it's not about legacy or anything like that at all, it's about the importance of the work we do to drive UK society or any society across the globe in the right way. I think, what advertising provides is, an ability, particularly for public service, to be telling the stories that need to get heard. And I think that's something that, I can sort of see through a lot of the panels is really coming up more so than it's ever been before. So for me, I'm sort of very excited about that. I really am. And I suppose the last bit for me is, broadcast, maybe brand, it's a bit of an oasis amongst, the tech that's sort of happening here. And for me, I would say the tech businesses, the tech giants and so on, they of course do a great job, but they are a data warehouse. We are a dream factory in TV.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Good place to leave it.
Okay.
Rak, it's an absolute pleasure always. Have a great rest of Cannes. I look forward to seeing you up on stage on different panels, etc. But appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much. Cool. Great to see you again. Yeah. All right, cheers. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Media Leader Podcast. Our executive producer is me, Jack Benjamin. Special thanks to our production partner, Trisonic. You can find all our episodes on the podcast platform of your choice or on our website at uk.themedialeader.com. But do please remember to subscribe to be notified of our next episode. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at The Media Leader to receive daily coverage of all the biggest news stories in media and advertising. From all of us at The Media Leader, I'm Jack Benjamin. See you next time.